Rap About It with Mal Adams. Each week, Rap About It focuses on a key issue concerning American minorities. This series also explores current and topical news events in an effort to bring into sharper focus the implications of these events for the minority community. And now your host, Mal Adams.
Good day, everyone, wherever you are in the world, and welcome to GNN, the Global News Network. You're tapped into Japan Journal, the internet's #1 weekly English language online cybercast from Japan, with yours truly, your host, Mal Adams. We have a very special program here today for the second or third time on one of our shows. My longtime friend, brother, hometown buddy, Preston Love Jr., who is a candidate for U.S. Senate from Nebraska. And Preston, for those of you who don't know, is a speaker, a lecturer, a writer on civil rights and Black history and economic policy. He's an adjunct professor at University of Nebraska at Omaha and executive director of forurban.org. He's founder and CEO at Black Votes Matter Institute of Community Engagement and has worked at the Nebraska Democratic Party and has a graduate degree in professional studies at Bellevue University. He lives in Omaha, Nebraska, born and raised in Omaha, Nebraska, and is my choice for U.S. Senate to represent the state of Nebraska. My good brother, welcome to the program again. Good to have you.
Well, Malcolm, my pleasure. And the key point of all of that introduction is you and I grew up together in what we call North Omaha, near North Side, Omaha, Nebraska,
Right.
in a very poverty stricken community. And we survived it. And we endured it. And we now can say, thank you, Lord, that we also now can witness to our beginnings, and we're still going at it. Both of us are blessed and still doing the do.
Absolutely. Yes, sir. Poverty-stricken, but inspired community.
Yes, sir.
Your father was like an uncle to me, friend of my dad, and I had my career in broadcasting started early, and he was a welcome guest on my program. And I know your entire family, your brothers, Richie and Norm, and your sister, and your family's like my family. Got a lot of people in it.
Yes, lots of Adamses and lots of love.
That's right.
Yes, sir.
That's right.
I did a 55, wrote a 55,000 word manuscript about African Americans in the state of Nebraska. I was asked to do 15,000 words, and that 15,000 words only applied to my introduction. The subject was too large.
Sure.
I did do 55,000 words, but part of it was the history of your family as it relates to representation at the state legislature back in the day. Twice your family was elected. One case is elected. Were both cases elected?
Initially, my Uncle John Adams Jr., the son of my granddad and a big brother, my father, was the first African-American senator to represent the Black community in the unicameral.
Yes.
Previously, it was bicameral, Nebraska.
Yeah, we did have an African-American that preceded a fellow by the name Ricketts.
That's right.
That name will come up as part of this conversation.
I see.
Yeah. Okay. But and then we had an appointed Black woman to the Senate. I don't know if you knew the wonderful family, a basketball player that played for the University of Nebraska, Mr. I'm having trouble remembering his name only because I haven't seen him since last week. But his name will pop up, and then his wife's name will pop up. But she was appointed early in the historical evolution of the state Senate. But that's why I made the difference between appointed and elected. But Al Maxey and his wife Joanna Maxey, she also set history, being the first Black woman to be appointed but served as our state rep. So
I
all of that
did
said,
not know that
we have
history.
his. Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
Okay, there were actually there were two or three others, I believe. I'm not sure. Correct me if I'm wrong. Dr. Macmillan may have served, and
Yeah.
a couple of others that preceded my Uncle John,
Yeah.
who transferred from the bicameral to the unicameral.
Yeah.
And
And what's interesting about that is even back to the first Mr. Ricketts, it was not because of this is a very good lesson in things, but it wasn't because Nebraska was progressive or saw the idea of having a diverse legislature. It was because early, without knowing what they were getting themselves into, the uh, the legislature was broken down by district, and the district that your relatives and the other blacks represented were predominantly Black. And so it could not be denied.
that's right.
And which is a quick lesson on at-large versus district elections, even now in, thank you, sir, in 2024.
I remember, you're providing me with one of my favorite topics as journalists to cover, and that's politics, particularly local and state politics as it pertains to my upbringing. I grew up in an office. My dad and granddad and Uncle John had Adams, and Adams attorneys at law, 2622 North 24th Street. And that's an incredible history, but this is not about my family, but it's about African-American community from post-World War II on
Yes.
to the civil rights period. As a professor of Black history, you know where I'm going with this. Sometimes we had things a lot better than we do now, then in terms of family, unity, and the camaraderie among our shared mission. Correct me if I'm wrong, but certainly the near north side of Omaha, Nebraska represented that, and you and I both are products of that upbringing, I think. It's fair.
Well, so very much, Malcolm. And again, the problem with me coming on your show, as it always has been and always will be, is we could talk for about 4 hours. And anything that is said could be a branch to another hour.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yes, because the idea that we've made progress could be argued intellectually when it relates to the community we grew up with and the community that I live in right now. The difference and the idea of progress is measured by the wrong set of attributes, my friend. And so the attributes that we had before we, quote, made progress were the greatest attributes. You mentioned them. We had family. We had integrated families. What I mean by integrated is we were families of units of unity within the bigger unity things. We had sets. We had the unity of religion, and we had commerce, and the idea of buying unified within it was no big subject. We just did it out of our just guts. And then we had all our self-supporting things in the community, and we had it well. We just didn't have economics. And
if I may say, we had an entrepreneurial spirit, which was natural because
we had that spirit. Yeah, we didn't have, we hadn't built wealth yet.
I'm in Japan and haven't had a job in 45 years because after I graduated from my career as a salaried employee of the networks, I opened shop in Japan here. And why did I know to do that? Because I used to sell the Omaha Star newspaper for Mildred
Yes, sir.
Brown on the corners to the Spencer Street barbershop. I'd drop off 30 papers, get on my bike, and run around town. And by the end of Saturday, I had $17.50.
Yeah, how much did, we may have some controversy here because I used to sell the paper. I want to know how much Miss Brown gave you per paper.
That's non-disclosure. And she promised me because I was a favorite son.
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
Do you know what? You
I was
told me
privileged.
something like that, sounded like that. But I too sold that paper, and it is so germane
Oh my
to our history. That was a paper that was founded in 1938 by a lady by the name of Mildred Brown, who
God.
wore a live carnation bouquet on
Every
her every day of her adult life. She was still her legacy still exists because she founded a paper in 1938 along with so many other cities around the country, but many of them have fallen by the wayside. And the Omaha Star now is owned by a familiar name in the journalism business, but it is a dotted line to being famous. But the person, Terry Sanders,
yes,
uh,
indeed.
is the owner, publisher, and editor, recently owned of that paper that is enduring. But she is the mother of Simone Sanders, who is on MSNBC.
That's right. And I believe she was on CNN, was she not?
She was, of course, with Bernie Sanders. She was on CNN. She was early. Uh, guess what? She was uh, doing work as an advisor and in the White House with guess who? The the Democratic nominee
That's
to
right.
be the president of the United States. She was on her staff before moving on into your business, the news.
Beautiful transition there for me. Thank you very much, sir.
Yes, sir.
So before
Yes,
we
sir.
get into talking about your strategy and what inspired you to run for the U.S. Senate to represent Nebraska, I know the story, but I want you to share that with my viewers. And it's part and parcel of what we just described, the way you brought up your sense of community and your sense of representing, looking back and reaching back and helping out with our growth and development. But Kamala Harris, sum it up for my viewers. We already know, the world knows that President Biden has opted not to continue his run. There was some behind the screens pressure, I suggest. You may know more about that than I. What made him do that at this particular point in time, but let's start at where we are right now. What a joyous occasion this is. It manifests itself by the overwhelming support that particularly young African Americans and Black women that have shown their love for her. She raised $81 million in one day. Talk on it for us, brother.
It's 100 million now, revised figure, by the way. 100 million she's raised in maybe 1.5 days, but she's up to $100 million because of her candidacy.
Start with how you're acquainted with her. I know you are acquainted with her. You worked with her. Talk about that a little bit, would you please? Where you met
Well,
her.
I initially met Kamala and during the 2020 election cycle, where she was traveling the country on her own behalf to become the president then. Because of the what was the significance of the Iowa caucus and the insignificance of the Nebraska primary, I can explain why each is each, but she came only as far as the Missouri River in 2020 in the Council Bluff. And beside the fact that I got in her face a little bit, let's forget about that. Anything that I may have gotten in her face about, we don't want to talk about that anymore. But I got in her face to say, look, we need you to come across this bridge and come in Nebraska and let us get the advantage as we try to get the vote out for the all of whoever is the nominee, and in that case, possibly you. We need you to come across the thing. And they, I got on them face because they were sitting. We were sitting. I have a picture. I'm going to have to find it of me and her sitting around the table. It doesn't say under the title is not Preston getting in her face, but the reality was I was because
Picture could
she,
talk.
yeah, she gave, she patted me on my head, but they wouldn't, they, and along with many other candidates, not just her, didn't want to come across the bridge. It wasn't worth their time because we were so late in the cycle that we were irrelevant. Iowa, on the other hand, was on the front end of the cycle. And so this was prior to the Iowa caucus. Whoever wins the Iowa caucus or comes in the top 2 or 3, got great points, move on to New Hampshire and then around the country. And so they were interested in only focusing on Iowa, even though those of us from Nebraska who had any sense, we came across, but it was only me and another person or two where I wanted her to be in front of crowds and all that. So that's when I first met her and then ran across her informally over the years. I was less than 2 weeks ago, I was with the second gentleman, her husband, in Omaha, and have pictures to prove it. But he has been here, I'd say 5 times over the course of once she was the vice president, he came. And in 2020, he came also because she, by that time, was the nominee for the vice president. The election hadn't, and I was, a community leader who received him when he made his trip here, and then he just came back. A couple of weeks ago. And just to close the loop on this conversation, I was in his face, and I'll tell you why later.
Well, give me a hint. Why?
I was in his face, and I continue to be in now their face, meaning the presumptive nominee and the presumptive nominee's husband, but really not them in particular, but the Democratic National Committee. I'm in their face, and anybody that shows up within my space that is connected with them, and of course he and she are, and I'm hoping to have a conversation with her very quickly about why I quote, I'm in their face. I'm being dramatic, but I'm very disappointed that at this juncture, with a little over 90 days left in the November election, that I haven't received my proper respect and the associated funding to make me even more viable as a United States senatorial candidate and the presumptive Democratic nominee from the state of Nebraska. And if we have the time, we can discuss why anything Nebraska would come up in this very important year. And I am rushed to say that several things should come up. And one of them, just one of the several things about Nebraska being a key factor in the 2024 election and in the life of democracy in this country is in Nebraska in this election. And I'm part of that. And there are other parts of the pie, including the Black community's performance and other things. And so that's why
that's going to be detailed. Let me touch on some shorter items initially before you get into that, because
you're a smart guy.
yeah. Let me take care of some other business first and play my role as a journalist and ask you,
yes, sir,
what initially inspired you to run for the U.S. Senate, and what experiences do you bring to the table that you believe will benefit the people of Nebraska?
Yes, sir. Well, that's a good question. I surely can answer it without notes.
Okay.
I have been working. Well, this is my home state. Nebraska is my home state. And of course, I'm living in one community. All of my living in Nebraska time, I spent a great number of my life outside of Nebraska, came back home in 2005. But my analysis, but more than an analysis, my experience in Nebraska in these last 20 years that I've been back home has not been pleasant as it relates to how Nebraska is being managed politically and the net effect of that management. It is a state that is one party rule. Let's don't quibble about which party. That's not the point. The detail is there is one party, that is the Republican Party, but that's not where I'm overwhelmed with that it happens to be Republican. It does, but that means that,
and it's been that way for years. Let's face it. It's been that way for years.
And it's been that way for years, at least the 20 years that I've been back home.
Yeah.
And so what does that mean? It means that all three of our Congress persons are from the Republican Party. Both of our United States senators from the Republican Party. Our governor is from the Republican Party. Our unicameral, which is made up of 49 members, has a great majority from the Republican Party. And so how does that work out for the rest of the state residents who are not in the Republican Party? It doesn't work out well. The experience is 20 years of observation and experiential that I have, not just observed, but experienced the effect of it all, and hasn't worked. We worked too hard to even do things like, most recently, the federal government had available to Nebraska $18 million to spend on summer food programs to feed kids while they're out of school and don't have access to food during meals, I should say, during the summer months, because many of them receive food during the school year. And so the governor in that one party refused to take the money. He thought it was welfare. At least that's the way he expressed. And so we're saying, wait a minute, let's don't quibble about the words, but don't you realize that the people have a need for them, and forget about your party and all that. I will tell you that the governor and I both played football for Nebraska.
Wow.
And he thinks we hug each other like we're almost as close as me and you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But we are a great associates. I have the respect for the office and all that, but we got in his face, and I, and so many others, and for the first time, quite frankly, in my observation, is he changed his mind and accepts it. But here's my point, is I have 42 examples of one of which I've given you, where the state is not really serving all of Nebraska. That means rural and urban for lots of different kinds of reasons. And so and for the last several cycles, the party, the Democratic Party, has not really produced a viable candidate in most of the federal offices that I just mentioned. Mm-hmm. And so we're not even being competitive to even have a chance. And so to me, it turns out, I found out I'm not going to live forever. I guess you may have not gotten your memo yet.
No.
But I've gotten mine.
I got yours, though.
Yeah. But it is time, Malcolm, for many of us, for different reasons, for us to step up and be counted if we really feel strongly about what's the impact of all of this is on our community. I have been serving the community all the 20 years I have been back. If you want to summarize me, I've been a server, but it's hard to service when you have to play more defense than you can play offense. And so, and that's what we have to do. So I ran initially, and this is an important part of the answer. I ran initially really not caring about whether I'd win or lose, Malcolm, but that I would have an opportunity to be in the room, be on debates, be in the conversation of, and offer up the contrast, the other choice on issues all up and down. I won't go down all of them, but a couple: women's right to choose.
On some of them, yeah, we'll touch some of them, but your point
right
is well taken. The bigger point is you're playing defense in order to play offense.
That's correct. Now that was, I would do this with an A and B part of the answer, that part of the answer, Malcolm, and that was my initial reason. I was going to be like Jesse Jackson, 1984. Yep. I was going to be able to be on the stage and be able to articulate the attributes of my side of the issue. My side, meaning the side of many that believe what I believe. But that has changed. I do think now, Malcolm, that there is a path to beat these my opposition, who was the former governor and sitting in the seat right now. There is a real path based on a lot of, so I have added to my reasons for running now is to try to be the senator.
Understood. Understood. Interesting. I appreciate that background because a lot of people, particularly African Americans and members of your constituency, would say, "Oh man, he doesn't have a chance. You know, this state, Nebraska, he ain't gonna turn. You know, blah blah blah." And I remember the day I grew up in a Republican family who were African Americans, right?
Yeah.
Isn't that an interesting phenomenon? So that we could just do what you described earlier, bring something to the table. My relatives, my ancestors, to get a seat at the table, to enunciate our issues and concerns. You couldn't do it if you're outside. So to participate in making and proposing change. But this transitions into another thing about your skill set in being realistically someone who would be considered to be a senator to represent this conservative state of Nebraska, is someone who, like you said, you would hug your former football player who's governor, but you're in his face, you whisper in his ear, say, "Man, let's let's do this." And that is a required skill to be in the Senate today. It's no all Democratic and all Republican. Joe Biden, bless his heart, did a good job in doing bipartisan kinds of negotiations and achieving some successes. I see you as a person who would have those same skill sets to be able to do that. Do you agree?
Yes, thank you. I do. I do see myself as a bridge maker because, and now, the next level of understanding of the environment and my role in it is that we're so divided. Divisions are okay when you're talking about different responses to issues. That's expected, and that's part. But when those divisions become divisive, then nobody cares about the solutions. They're just caring about what side wins. I'm not one of those guys. I'm looking for, and would be a senator who would be looking for solutions on all of the myriad of issues that include Nebraska state issues, but federal issues, whether it be the border or right to choose, women's right to choose, ban on assault weapons, so many things, us recognizing the impact of climate change, but also global. The fact that I'm from a poverty-stricken community doesn't mean that I don't have the intellectual capacity to get my head around whether we should be funding Ukraine or let them hang out and let Russia just run all over them, and then run all over the rest of the NATO countries, or that we fight back and become World War III. That doesn't. So I'm ready to step into that role. I'm willing to step in the role of not taking sides now. And I say now, if you want to ask me why I say now, but in the Middle East, I had pretty much took a side early in the conflict. I no longer am trying to be on anybody's side other than the hostages and all the people who are victims of the carnage, no matter whose side started it and whose side did it. It's people who are being victimized, their community, their family. And so some of us need to be sitting at the table trying to get the conflict resolved, not trying to get on somebody's side. You got Netanyahu right now in the United States getting ready to talk to a joint session of the House, and that's all kind of primed with his strategic thinking that he's trying to get people to take sides. And if I were in the Senate and if I would have time with him, I would tell him he's got to really raise up the idea of ceasefire no matter what. Get the hostages back and stop the carnage. Sorry.
No problem at all. But certainly, as a state, as a U.S. senator, you represent 1/3 of the powers of the government, the judicial, the executive, and the congressional, right? And that role you just described is very important. And you must have a voice in trying to resolve some of those issues. But let's bring it back home to Nebraska.
Yes.
Nebraska has a significant rural population. What are your plans to support rural communities and address their unique challenges? And I would venture to say they compose the majority of your potential constituency.
Oh, they do. I gotta just throw a little bone to one of the things you said in the introduction of this question about Nebraska is the idea of something we learned in middle school, 3 branches of government, what their role was to be the checks and balances against each other. That is no longer the model that is being used. The Supreme Court now is just another political arm of the executive branch, and the check ain't there. The check is not there. And so
we can correct that, and you'll be able to perform a role as a senator in dealing with the legislative part of that.
Yes, sir.
It's a different ball game now, huh?
It's a different ball game. And so, and just for the record, this election not only and our wonderful my support for Kamala Harris as the next president, but I'll tell you, whatever the results of that race, let's just assume she wins.
Yeah.
If the House and the Senate,
assuming that.
but if she wins and we lose the control of one or both of the legislative branch, the Senate and the House, then we don't have the Supreme Court as a check, and we won't have the legislative branch will just be a stopper, not a
understood.
So that's a whole nother story. But in Nebraska,
and that's why I raised the question. You're an African American politician and a scholar, and someone who is skilled and capable to represent all people from the state of Nebraska.
Yes, sir.
So I know that's forefront on your agenda and your logistics. But as you described, and I understand as a journalist who covers these things every day, it ain't the same. Democracy is in trouble.
It's in trouble.
I want you to describe that and speak to it, given what you just announced as the potential success of Kamala Harris, the first female, the first African-American and Southern Asian lady of color to be the commander-in-chief. It's an incredible thing to conceive, but she's got a real chance of pulling it off.
Yeah, she has a chance of pulling it off.
And she'll be able to do it with the help of minority communities and mainstream people as well in the Democratic Party. So look, the possibility of you representing a conservative agricultural state like Nebraska is not so far-fetched, is it now, given the...
No, it's not far-fetched, but let me get back to the core question, which is, and I'm going to put it in my own words, Mal, but Preston, we surely like you and all of that. But are you going to represent urban, Omaha and Lincoln, and maybe all the way to Fremont? But what about the rest of the state?
North
But
Platte, North
yeah, so North Platte, Scottsbluff, but you got to understand that one of the things I bring to the table, which seems like a change to the subject, but it's not,
No,
and that
it's
is,
the point. It's his own point, I think. Go ahead.
yeah, and that is that I have lived, I've had some longevity, and with that comes some experiences and some wisdom. I have experienced the whole state.
Yeah.
I'm not just popping my head up in Omaha and then think the world will fall to my their needs.
Yeah,
I have traveled during the campaign, before the campaign, throughout the state, have relationships, friends, associates throughout the state of Nebraska. And we must realize we think of it as being rural. It is an agricultural state made up of all the farmers and that part of the agriculture, and then the ranchers who raise cattle and all of that. And I understand the difference, by the way. But I have traveled the state prior to being a candidate. But since I've been a candidate, I have traveled the state, uh, all over the state. We've been all over the state in listening sessions and meeting new people, listening to what the people are saying about their needs and uh, and their desires and their problems in and my reception out in the state of Nebraska has been surprisingly wonderful. That doesn't mean they all going to vote for me, but there will be a lot more uh, in the greater Nebraska, is the way it's now being said, that will not only vote for me, but see me as a choice that makes sense to them, not just vote for me, but trying to vote in their own self-interest. I have just announced, Malcolm, and I know this is not a campaign interview, but it's
No. We
important.
want to hear what your
Yeah.
plans, your
Well,
proposals, your ideas are, in terms
this
of
is a
rural
direct,
development, veterans, immigration, all of those issues.
yes, sir. Well, this is a direct response to your question, and that is I'm going to be announcing here probably first of next week that my first 30 days, I'm going to be putting together three comprehensive study groups, one for each one of our congressional districts, to study the needs, the problems, the weaknesses, and of each of those discreetly. And because if you study the needs of Nebraska and you mix them all up in one great big gumbo soup, you're really missing the point. What's going on out there in Scottsbluff is a whole other dish problem than in Omaha or in the greater Lincoln area. They need to be studied relative to that. And so I'm going to, the study participants will be from each one of those, as well as some of my staff and others. And out of that will come some reporting to articulate those needs so that we can then develop strategies and solutions and bring policy and money to the individual CDs regions on purpose and right away. And my focus as a senator, in spite of the fact that I'll be part of senators voting for this and voting for that. My focus in my time in the Senate initially will be on Nebraska.
Sure. Okay. Very interesting. Okay. Let's take a little rapid response game here. I'm going to name an issue, a topic, and let me hear your brief assessment of it and how you're going to approach it. Let's start with healthcare. I don't care if you're a rancher or a farmer, or you know, that's,
Yeah,
we
yeah,
all share those concerns, don't we? Particularly those of us who living on Social Security. And Japan, I speak to you from a nation that has one of the best healthcare programs in the world, and it's just unconscionable about how America is not handling their business
yeah.
in terms of their older citizens. So, what specific changes would you like to see in the healthcare system, and how do you plan to make healthcare more affordable and accessible for Nebraskans?
Well, the first part of my answer will not be a direct answer because I want to make sure that we don't change something in the healthcare system. And
Okay.
that is the one thing that has worked well is the Obamacare, as we call it, the federal uh, healthcare system that provides a way for lots of people to be able to afford healthcare system and in under the umbrella of what we call Obamacare, but that has been in existence now for over 10 years, and it's got hundreds of millions of I wish I knew, I should have that number, but how many people are enrolled, and it is solving a problem. So that and the reason I bring it up because part of the other parties' approach to the healthcare, one of the things on their uh, Project 2025 list is to get rid of Obamacare. And the trauma that would cause in our country, I don't even have the time to develop. So one on the healthcare is I would keep that in place and enhance it. Number two, I would surely one of the big changes and additions would be looking at healthcare beyond the physical and really realizing the impact of where we are in reality in America is the need for much more focus on mental health and all of its pieces uh, before, during, and after. Uh, we're dropping the ball on that, and some of it is costing us money in so many ways because we're overlooking the value of doing preemptive and preventable uh, health care in the mental health area and treating those and putting them in prison uh, instead of treating their real all of that. So that would be absolutely something that I feel strongly about. I would add to that in our country right now, Malcolm, under healthcare is the way in which we're treating women and their access not just to abortion rights, so the access to women to uh, all the proper physical
Sure.
and health
Absolutely.
facility that includes keeping the government out of making decisions of for women about their pregnancies and all of the issues in and around it that are personal both in their lives and personal as to their bodies. We need to get as far back to rewind the clock and get Roe versus Wade back on in whatever ways we can do that legally. The way that the Republicans are pushing us is throwing that to the states, uh, and we're looking to, and I'm looking to do something that would negate all of the nonsensical stuff that's coming up in one state and making sense in this state, nonsense in this state doesn't work well for a nation. We need to have an overall umbrella, and we did have one before Roe versus Wade was. So healthcare is, as you say, kind of bulletized elevator wise. That's my response to you.
Okay, very good. Appreciate the short answer. Let me just comment that what you described earlier as one who has to play defense in order to get some offense going. That doesn't change, but that's the nature of your role as representative of all the people. And so,
Yeah.
so far, the health things that you describe pertain to everybody. I don't care if you're a farmer,
Yeah. Oh no.
rancher,
Yeah.
or
And,
somebody in the near north side of Omaha, Nebraska.
yeah.
So
And
I
that's a
think that's
mess.
important to establish, because
Oh, that's a
I
message.
think
When I go out, I'm talking to farmers, and we're talking about healthcare. they don't say, well, what party are you in? They want to know just what you think about it.
Okay. Here's another one pertains to everybody. We're in this
Yes,
thing
sir.
for business. What about economic policies? Can you outline your economic recovery plan for Nebraska, particularly how you aim to support small businesses and create jobs in the state? That's something for everybody.
Well, first I have to reference the most recent conversation and activities going on in Nebraska and in North Omaha.
All right.
Is that under the Biden administration, and I'm not here as their advertising marketing guy, I'm talking about the real. The real is uh, against pushback at the federal level, we were able to get national legislation which made available millions of dollars for each state to distribute into its areas of need. We got our share meaning Nebraska's share.
Mm-hmm.
What was complex about this, and as I sit with other higher ups here now that I'm a senatorial candidate, I'm in conversation, is the mistake that was made here is a mistake I'm sure was made. But here we come with the Democratic solution, partial solution to economic development. And I'm going to just make sure that I recognize your small business part of that. Yes, that was fought by the Republican Party, but then was passed in Congress, and then the money was given to the states. Well, that sounds good so far, but it's not good so far because when we got that money in states like Nebraska, who are red states, given the money came from the blue and given to the red, two things, they didn't even want to acknowledge it. When they got the money, they're like, yeah, but they want to take all the credit for it. But then the distribution is where there needs to be better attention to who are you giving this money to?
Right.
Can you trust them to be fair? The answer in Nebraska was no.
Oh boy.
You cannot trust. And so what happened with that federal money is it was about to be distributed all over Nebraska with nothing or really small crumbs to places in Nebraska that didn't have a voice to stand up and fight for our share. We did have a couple African American senators and 5 other senators who were in urban areas that did come together and fought. So we ended up what started off to be $500 million, but ended up being for North Omaha about $250 million that is allocated for North Omaha. South Omaha got its fair share, but I want to say it was not easy.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but here's where the answer to your question comes. I wanted to acknowledge that is happening now. That money is being distributed right now.
Sure.
Throughout the community. Some say shouldn't have gone over there within the community because everybody in the community who wanted to spend some of that money didn't get some of the money. So those people are unhappy. So you get some of that. But that money is here and the economic growth potential is laying on the ground here. I mean, it's ready to go. Lots of good stuff to be said, in spite of some of the folks that are being critical of it because they didn't get their share. They don't realize that if it all works well, everybody who's in business is going to benefit. You mentioned small business, all the small businesses where you got some of that money and not. If you got a restaurant, you didn't get none of that money, more people are going to be buying food from you and all that. That is an education process that we got to have. All right. But my thing is on the study that I mentioned to you, it's one of the underlining kind of directives to that study is how we can spur the development of or support of small businesses in each one of those 3 quadrants, as I mentioned. Or 3 does not say quadrant, does it? But the 3 areas in the state where economic development is, that they have economic developments in Grand Island, in Kearney,
Sure.
in Ocala, And so those little, so yeah, we got it in North Omaha. We're just like them. We're on that list. And so how do we do that in a way in Ogallala, and how we do it in North Omaha should be different. But the idea of it, somebody's got to be looking out to, I'm going to be a flag bearer in that area.
Okay, but to the extent that you're successful in implementing and attaching the correct protocols in the distribution of the funds will also lead to job creation, right? For everybody.
Absolutely. But the other part of this that is a little more subtle, if I'm a United States Senator, I will be in the governor's office, verbally or otherwise, saying, here's what you've got to understand the other side of this, and your distribution has got to reflect this, as opposed to the same guy, Preston Love, knocking on his door and not wanting to talk about my time with him, just about Husker football.
Sure.
Yes, sir.
No, my suggestion is
and
if you're seated in Congress as a senator, you would be able to dictate the protocols and the rules before the money got to Nebraska so that the distribution is fair and balanced.
That's the point I'm making when I'm having those conversations. We can't just trust the system. You throw that $500 million to the state and everything's going to be all right. That's a mistake. And so I will be in those conversations, my friend. And after, let's say, the money comes, I will have a lot more leverage as a United States Senator than I talking to the governor than I am a fellow football player.
Very good. Not only a fellow football player, but also an African-American brother from the near north side of the urban part of Omaha, Nebraska.
That's correct.
What I'm addressing now are issues that pertain to all aspects and segments of the great state of Nebraska. Here's another one.
What I just want to put a pin on both of the ones you've asked me so far. They're statewide.
Absolutely.
They're not democratic. They are issues that are universal, and they just need attention.
That's why I'm on this line of questioning.
Yes, sir.
Let me go to the next one in the interest of time. Education. You are part and parcel of education. What are your top priorities for improving education in Nebraska, and how will you work to make college more affordable for students in Ogallala and North Platte?
I do know on a global set, and I mean global Nebraska.
Sure. Yeah.
And to the question, we just are and currently are fighting a battle right now. One of the big issues that has rose up in education is using public money to fund private schools. Okay. I first of all am opposed to that, and second of all have been given endorsement by the Nebraska School Education Association, which is also opposed to it. But so they have the confidence in my support and thinking that as a senator, I would be, advocating against that. That's a biggie. Also in this state.
Before you leave that, what are some of the points that make you opposed to that? The mishandling, the distribution, the unfair application of the funds, and funding private schools that don't adhere to the public agenda or something like that? What's behind it?
Well, first of all, if you want to have a private school, I'm not against private schools. I am against funding the private schools with public money. And so if you fund anything, private schools or anything else you want to call them, because they're now coming up with new names, so you get tricked. But you're taking money out of the pool of money that should be used to enhance the public school. And believe me, we haven't run out of ways and needs in the public sector for public schools that we can just, take money away and give it to somebody's way to escape public schools for all the wrong reasons, by the way. We've got problems in public schools that could be fixed by keeping all the money we can right here in the public sector. Is the big thing.
Let me play devil's advocate here. Let me play devil's advocate. Is it not feasible that public funds could be disseminated and distributed to different segments of the state, different populace, and that have different needs. For example, the near north side of Omaha, Nebraska, where you need technical schools, and you would have administrations that would act in support of those students who would be in attendance of that.
Yeah. In fact, as a matter of fact, in Chicago, Illinois, if I were running for Senate in Chicago, Illinois, I may have a different view of this. You're saying within Nebraska, but I'm going to use Chicago because there is a mature use of private schools with specific and mature reasons for it, and it then could qualify for a different view of the use of public money for those kinds. In Nebraska, all it is just getting out of public schools because of all the real and perceived things that are going on in public school. The answer is not to allow those who really, that if they have that view, they probably have the money to support that and don't need that. But I don't want to go that far. But I do want to say that's your choice. Go ahead and do it. But don't tamper with public schools in the process, because the reason why you're leaving is not specific and germane. It is just you're escaping from the public schools. And that is not something we want to reward you with public funds.
Okay. You represent, describe your district to me. How does that break down? I forgot.
If I may, I want to just bulletize this. The other thing going on in Nebraska is the Republicans are constantly beginning to tamper with the education. They want it and have verbalized the desire to put the whole education system underneath the governor's will. In other words, make it a department that will over politicize it. And I don't care whose side you're on it, but it surely is not the right thing to do. And then the last thing I would say, again, bulletize wise, is one of the reasons why you wouldn't do it is because one of the parties is beginning to think that they figured out what people can read, what people can teach, and all of that. And so if you give all the power to the governor, then if he thinks that we can't read something that he thinks is CRT or something, or some book that has a reference to something he doesn't agree with, he can make it happen. That's the potential.
CRT is critical race theory.
Yes.
Yeah, sure. Those kind of things. Okay. But if we had direct funds from the public purse that would finance some private schools in our community, we could deal with that curriculum.
Well, no, that's my point. If we were, that's the maturity part. If we had reached that point, then I'd have to take another look at it. Sure. Because some of that model does work in other cities where we had more dense, we're more dense in the community than a few guys or girls who might have a good idea on maybe it doesn't have longevity, maybe that. We don't want to open that door unless we're ready to wallow in it.
Okay, here's a subject that pertains particularly to the community that we grew up in, and that's an issue of social justice. How do you plan to address systemic racism and promote social justice if elected to the Senate? That's a broad question, but
sure. Social justice is so broad, but in particular, if we wanted to kind of break it down into pieces, social justice would include
policing reform.
Yeah, so it would include kind of the whole pie of legal in the legal realm, all the way from having police in our elementary schools, in high schools, and those resource officers, and then what we find is whether or not we're going to end up putting more kids into the criminal justice system too early and for wrong reasons. That's part of social justice. And then we get into the sentencing part of social justice. We get into the crowding of prisons by not recognizing who should go to prison, who should go for drug help, who should go for mental health, all of that social justice piece. We're getting ready in Nebraska to build another prison complex. And we're the ones that are in, there's no doubt about it, they're overcrowded, 4 times the population that should be in the buildings or in the buildings. They have trouble hiring staff, and so they can't let them out of the cell but an hour or so because they can't manage the it's a cycle. But part of that thinking is who should be in prison and who should not, and who should have been sentenced to prison and who should not. All of that is part of the social justice part, but it does have a wider circle. I guess the answer to your question, without me just kind of listing and defining it, is you have to have an interstate, where I mentioned one party rule. You don't have people in important positions who have the sensitivity of the social justice parameters, who have an understanding of alternate ways of thinking and doing in a social justice sort of way. Not in the times of the civil rights era where we were just fighting back. Social justice could have been included about drinking fountains or about sitting at the lunch counter. But now we are having to think through the realities of our communities. We have communities that still are poverty stricken and getting more. What are the solutions are part of the social justice parameters and thinking process. All of that on paper could be laid out in a big room and thought through. But if you don't have people in that room who have any kind of sense of reality or wisdom, then I don't care if you lay it out or not. People are laying it out, but they're not. But they and if I can be so bold, since I'm talking all the way to Japan, I can get away with it without getting beat up right now. They'll beat me up tomorrow, but not. And that is, we've got too many people who are representing the community and who are from the community, but they're not really representing. They're there to represent, but they're not representing. And so we now in the century we're in now, is we have to be very careful who sits at the table on behalf of the community. And we need to develop some kind of check mechanism, because we got folks working on their resume harder than they are with the community. So they're sitting there because they're from the community, because they're African American, because they're female. But when they get there, they are representing themselves. And we're not getting.
I left Nebraska in 1973 or 74, went to California, and the old adage pertains. The more things change, the more things remain the same in that regard.
There. And let me just mention this, Malcolm. You're absolutely. Let me just say this. I'll make it quick. But here I am. I'm a person who, without question, even though there are always questions, who served my community all my life, but in the last 20 years since I moved back, very specific: serve. I should not be questioned on that level. Okay, I paid my dues and have done it. So here I am now as a community elder from North Omaha, running for the United States Senate. And so the question becomes, what is progress? And the progress is that, yes, I'm running for Senate, but the progress is also in observation that now that I'm running, Malcolm, we have African Americans, I'm going to be real specific, who are in very significant position, public and private. Public meaning they run or executives in nonprofits or organizations, and we're not, or they work for corporate Omaha. They're in significant positions or they're elected officials. All right. And I'd say 80% of them cannot stand up and say, I'm for Preston Love for United States Senate.
Stop right
Is
there.
that
Stop.
huh?
Stop right there.
Yeah.
And let me say it in conclusion and in summary, and I'll give you the last word. But let me say at this point is that to all of our listeners in Omaha, Nebraska, in Scottsbluff, in Ogallala, and all points west and east, this is an interview about the candidacy of Professor Preston Love Jr.'s campaign for U.S. Senate from Nebraska, where he is focusing on a comprehensive strategy that you've heard so far that aligns with the Democratic Party's basic principles. Biden and Harris, there may be some differences, but goals while addressing the specific needs and concerns of Nebraskans, as you've just heard. And by emphasizing his experience, his policy proposals, and commitment to social justice, he can build a strong campaign that resonates with a diverse electorate and position himself as a viable candidate for positive change. I'm going to leave it right there, and I'm going to give him the last word, my brother. I appreciate you coming on the show today, and we're going to end it right here. Give us your last words and what you want to say to our subscribers and our viewers here about the state of affairs of politics in general and your particular campaign and what you want to address and what outcomes you want to see in a capsulized.
I want to say this, Malcolm, that I appreciate the time with you on a personal level and professionally, and as a candidate for the United States Senate. It is not strange to talk about a United States Senate in this global world, in any country that you might have been in. The conversation is relevant in Japan as it is in Virginia, if I may say. Because people in Virginia cannot vote for me, it's a relevant conversation. People in Japan cannot vote for me, but it's a relevant conversation. So I appreciate the opportunity because in this community that we live in now, this global community, part of the biggest challenge is for people to be educated about the things that are going on in and around them, and all of the lack of knowledge that I find all the way, even in my own community, about some basics, the three branches of government, and all of that stuff. And so I do appreciate that. Going forward, I just want to say that what this discussion really is a good example of is how much there is to discuss, and for people to slow down for a while and just take a sense of reflection of what's at stake. What's at stake in America in 2024 could very well be the whole idea of democracy and the experiment of democracy in the United States. Some of us feel that it's on the verge of being disheveled. So not only my race, but the races up above me and races below me contribute to that. In my particular case, and I will leave you with, and your audience with, I'm hoping that my opposition, who former Governor Ricketts, that goes all the way back to the front of the show.
Okay.
Our first black senator in Nebraska, state senator, was named Ricketts. This Ricketts, former governor and current senator, has been challenged by the news media to have a debate. And so I would like maybe to come on soon again to talk about, did we have a debate? Are we going to have a debate? And because we said yes, he has been dragging his feet, and we don't know. I'm going to go before the media, before the week is up. Today is Wednesday here, and challenge him if he hadn't already said yes. It's time. Don't be hiding. Goliath doesn't usually hide from David. So we're going to see how that happens. And I also want to say that I have the great honor to be able to welcome, not for my political campaign, but to my city, the son of Martin Luther King will be visiting us, Malcolm, next month. And we'll keep you in tune with that. And that they're also on the week after he comes to Omaha is the celebration, August 28th, of the March on Washington in 1963. This will be the 61st anniversary year. All of that is going on. And so lots happening.
Well,
and
let me just say, as to my constituency, my subscribers, this is a global broadcast where people who are listening are tapped into GNN, the Global News Network, which is a division of Totown Communications Company Limited, and this program, Japan Journal, sometimes we call it Rap About It, which I started at the ABC affiliate in Omaha. Your dad was a regular guest on that particular show. That is 1974. So this is the 50th anniversary of Rap About It with Mal Adams, as we speak. That went from Nebraska to California to Japan. So we have hundreds of thousands of subscribers on our digital YouTube channel that will be able to see this. So you'll be well distributed and highly placed. And I'm happy to follow up as you can make yourself available, because I'm committed to perform my function as a professional media guy for fair and balanced discussion and dissemination of information.
May I just take a personal privilege? I don't know if it's a privilege or not, but I surely want the people to know, if you have some agreement where I'm coming from. You asked a lot of good questions for people to get a handle on where I'm coming from. One of the biggest challenges I have, quite frankly, here is that I'm running against a billionaire. Yeah. And so he has unlimited resources. People, anybody wanted to donate to my campaign. I don't know if you have a link you can put up.
Give it to us verbally, and we'll put it in.
So essentially, simply to I guess in the mail, or there's a Act Blue for people that know that. I'm trying to figure out what is the best way to describe how they can, from if they were dispersed through the world. My email address is probably the easiest thing to present, and that would be Preston Love Jr. So JR, Preston Love Jr. at Gmail. Any requests or through PayPal or any of that route could be done, and I could receive. I do have
that's all lowercase, no spaces. Preston Love Jr. at gmail.com. Okay.
Yes.
And we'd also invite all of our subscribers to feel free to comment, to feel free to share this video, and feel free to subscribe for more of this kind of content coming down the pike. But particularly, since this is on behalf of your political campaign, we're interested in supporting your fundraising activities. So any comments and inquiries as pertains to that, we're welcome to share that information with you as our viewers would comment or donate. So I'll be feeding that information back to you. And I want to just thank you for your time once again and wish you all the best in your pursuits. You're doing the right thing, and good luck to you, my friend.
Thank you, Mal. Thank you for the blessing.
All right. And that's going to do it for another edition of Japan Journal, the internet's #1 weekly English language online cybercast from Japan, with your host, yours truly, Mal Adams, here with my special guest, Preston Love Jr., candidate for the U.S. Senate representing Nebraska. All right. And as we say in signing off, see you, wouldn't want to be you, unless you're right up in downtown Kakiao City in Shizuoka Prefecture, Japan, with me, Brother Malcolm in Japan. Peace and sayonara. Thank you, Professor. Appreciate you. All right.
Rap About It with Mal Adams. Each week, Rap About It focuses on a key issue concerning American minorities. This series also explores current and topical news events in an effort to bring into sharper focus the implications of these events for the minority community.